Frozen I sit in a state of distress, afraid to admit that the fears I suppress have come to fruition, premonition revealed through divine intuition. Your hair looks different, so neatly braided. I sit at my table, my appetite jaded. You still wear those glasses, that ghostly gaze. You look like a phantom of now distant days when we sat at these tables, enjoying our food. These flashbacks enable profound change in mood. Does she still know me? Does she still care? I wish she would show me. These feelings I share with my younger self have made their way through time and space. The language of love moves at palpable pace. That was a poem from my book, Ego Death. And that's also the story of how my life changed forever. Now, before I get into this video, if you see me looking off to the side, it's because I'm reading my notes from my phone because I don't want to miss any single part of this story. And believe me when I tell you that you don't want to miss any single part of this story either. So, before I explain the poem, let me explain how I got to that point where that story even happened. So, when I was 19 years old, I met this girl. And if you want to know the full story behind that, you can go and read my first poetry book, Soul Shock, which is the prequel to Ego Death. Just go to my website and you can get the introduction to that for free $99 by signing up to my email list. That being said, I met this girl when I was 19 years old and instantaneously fell head over heels in love with this girl. Okay, I had caught feelings in the past, but I had never truly fallen in love until I laid eyes on this girl for the first time. And it wasn't so much how she looked, it was more so how we connected. We connected at a very deep level, the likes of which I had never really experienced in my entire life. So I fell in love with her, and one of the primary means of connection was our perception of working. Now, at the time, I was working at H&M, she was working at Starbucks, so low-end retail jobs, and neither of us was really making a lot of money or anything, right? We were 19 years old. We were broke, just like regular 19-year-olds. And I remember we met around February of 2020, and she told me that she was going to quit her job in March of 2020. March came around, she didn't quit her job. Me, on the other hand, I had already told myself I was going to quit my job. So fast forward to sometime during the first week of March, and I text her. I say, hey, I need some advice. And the reason why I was asking her this question before you even say anything is because, again, I knew that we connected in terms of our view on work. So I figured that she would give me the validation that I felt like I needed at the time to take that leap of faith and quit my job. So I asked her, do you think I should quit my job? And the response that she gave me is still to this day, okay, as of what's today? October 8th, 2023. It's still etched into my subconscious mind. She told me, I think you should always have a job. I know you hate working, but you're going to hate being broke even more. Now, mind you, I was already doing YouTube at this time. I wasn't making any money off of YouTube, but I knew in my heart and in my soul that I would be making money off of YouTube. And when she told me that, I felt highly offended and disrespected, because this was supposed to be the person who truly understood me. This was supposed to be the one person that I could confide in, and in that moment, she folded. Now, ultimately, I'm not putting this on her, okay? I'm just saying that she said that she wanted to quit her job, and I said I wanted to quit my job. In my mind, I created this fantasy where we would both quit our jobs together and then ride off into the sunset as I became a YouTuber and she did whatever she wanted to do, so on and so forth. That was a lesson in regards to not placing expectations on other people. Don't place expectations on who you think other people can or will become. Take them at face value. Again, this is no slight to her by any means, as you will see later on in the video. However, I learned a very valuable lesson when she told me that. But I didn't learn that lesson until a few years later. So when she told me that I should always have a job and that I was going to hate being broke, I perceived that as, you're going to go broke because you're not going to make it on YouTube. That's basically how I read her message. Now, she might have meant something completely different. We never really talked about it. But she told me that, and I said, okay, thanks for the advice. And then I put in my 2 weeks notice probably a day later. Okay, 1 or 2 days later, I put in my 2 weeks notice, and I quit that job. Now, again, I was not monetized on YouTube, nor was I even remotely close. I wasn't even close to being monetized on YouTube at the time. But I just had a gut feeling that it was going to happen in the near future. And lo and behold, it did. I quit my job in March of 2020, and by June of 2020, I got monetized. And that was by the grace of the divine right there. That was just me manifesting through a higher power, because there was no light at the end of the tunnel for me. Honestly, in retrospect, she was right. She was absolutely right. Because for one, I was broke. I had $621.32 to my name when I quit my job. But in addition to that, I wasn't even making the type of content which eventually got me monetized. So, yeah, I had no semblance of a plan or any sort of vision other than making money from YouTube. And I ended up doing it. Now, go ahead and look at my notes so that I don't miss anything. Oh yeah, so during that time, during the course of me getting monetized on YouTube and really locking in on YouTube, she ghosted me. Okay, she ghosted me. So imagine she tells me, I think you should always have a job, you're going to hate being broke, etc. And then she ghosted me right after that. You can imagine how I probably perceived that at the time, especially given how insecure I already was. I was already predisposed to insecurity because I had gotten my heart broken in the past, and I had assumed that it was because I wasn't successful. Now, let me just go ahead and put this out there. If you're 19 years old and you're thinking that women don't like you because you're not financially successful, I need you to just look in the mirror. Just look in the mirror. Don't say anything to yourself. Just look in the mirror for 30 minutes until you realize how stupid that sounds. Okay, because 19-year-olds are supposed to be broke. When you're 19, you're broke. That's just life. Okay, that's life. You haven't had enough time to acquire the skill sets which will get you the big money yet. It's just common sense. Okay, so whoever tells you that women don't like 19-year-olds because they're broke, they're lying. Anyways, she ghosted me, and at the time, I was very, very firmly set in the belief that she ghosted me because I wasn't successful, because I wasn't financially successful. And for whatever reason, all of the dates that we went on, all of the fun times that we had and all of that, the deep conversations, I simply disregarded that in favor of this belief that I had that I wasn't successful enough for her. Now, over that process, I was also actively learning about manifestation. Manifestation, the law of attraction. This is something that I have mastered throughout the years. And during that time, I was putting it into practice as I was learning it and actually proving that it was possible, not only to myself, but to everyone around me and to everyone who watched my channel, that you could actually manifest something by putting it out into the universe and then taking inspired action and following your intuition. So once I realized that manifestation does indeed work, then I devised a new vision for myself. You see, once I got monetized on YouTube, I said, well, I didn't think I could get that. Well, I knew I could get it, but I still had the limiting beliefs that conflicted with my faith in myself and in the divine. But I knew that since I could get that, I could probably get more. And I still had this lingering resentment towards that woman for ghosting me because I was broke. Again, that's not necessarily why she actually ghosted me, but at the time, that's what I was thinking. So I felt this deeply rooted resentment, and I developed this new vision in my mind. And this is something I don't really talk about that much because it's actually pretty embarrassing to think about. But I suspect that a lot of young men have very similar aspirations. So in my personal vision, right, my dream life, I would ride down this particular street. I won't say what the street name is, but maybe some of my friends that I've taken to this place, they know exactly what street I'm talking about. I would drive down this particular street in a really nice car, and she would see me in the nice car, and she would feel very, very bad about the decision that she made to ghost me, because then she'll realize that she fumbled to the bag. Now, when I say this out loud, I actually hesitate to even continue filming this video because I don't really want anybody to know that this is what I was thinking about 25/8. Okay, waking up in the middle of the night thinking about this. I had my mind programmed to think about this automatically on autopilot. So I would always visualize myself just driving this nice car, and her just realizing that she fumbled the bag and that I was the one who got away, and all of this very, very, very cringe, these really cringe ideals that I set for myself, these cringe aspirations. But that's just where I was at the time. And like I said, I suspect that a lot of people watching this probably have similar aspirations. If you had your heart broken, really a lot of young men who are successful probably are successful because they got their heart broken. Okay, and if you've gotten your heart broken, you can probably attest to that. You've probably had very similar visions, you just never really verbalized them to other people. But that was my vision. And it's also worth noting that this was the place, this street. The reason why I chose this street in particular was because this was the last place that me and her hung out at. So if you read Soul Shock, then you'll see how I list off all the dates that we went on and all the places that we went to, and you can put two and two together. So that was the place that me and her had went to. So fast forward to March of 2022. So a full 2 years later, after the last time that I saw her. Well, even longer than that, because I saw her at the end of February 2020. And like I said, I quit my job in March 2020. March 2022, a lot has changed. I'm in my new apartment, a nice apartment in a nice part of DFW. I have a brand new 2022 BMW 330i. Okay, really, really nice car. And this is before I realized that I couldn't afford it, by the way. So in my mind, I just had a Beamer. I had no semblance of understanding that I was too broke to afford the car that I was driving. Had a designer belt, a Gucci belt. I always wanted one since I was in high school. I had some jewelry that I paid way too much money for, $3,000 for some white gold, small rope chain, Cupid pendant, a couple of bracelets, $3,000. I had a whole new wardrobe, overcoats, turtlenecks, right? And I had this whole persona of just being really successful and being rich in a sense. Even though I only made, $40,000 that year, in my mind, I was rich. I was rich because compared to what I was making at H&M, I was rich, realistically speaking. But not rich enough for the lifestyle I portrayed and lived. But like I said, I didn't realize that until later on. So, March 2022, that's the life that I'm living. Back to the poem. Okay, so what happens in that poem? I'm not going to break it down line by line, but let me just explain the general idea. So, I want to say around March 6th or 7th of 2022, I went to this particular place where this street is located, the street that I was talking about earlier, the street in my vision. I went to this particular place and met a subscriber and his sister. Now, this is something that I normally would not do. Okay, I normally wouldn't do this. If you email me asking me to meet you in person, I will probably say no. For whatever reason, my gut told me to say yes this time, this one time. I don't know why, but I met up with a subscriber and his sister. If you're watching this, you know exactly who you are. Okay, shout out to you. They don't even know that this happened on that day, though. Okay, they did not know that this happened on that day. So, hung out with them for maybe a few hours, and everything was cool. I was having a really, really good day, and I was driving them back to their car because this was their first time at this place, and the parking garage was really, really big, and they didn't know how to get back to their car. So, I'm driving them back to their car in my BMW. I'm feeling myself. Okay, I'm feeling myself, and as I'm driving through the parking garage, I see a car drive by, a very familiar car. A very familiar car. In fact, it looked a lot like the car that I had been in the last time that I saw this girl. Her car. I won't say what type of car, the color or anything, but it's a relatively common car, but for whatever reason, something told me, just look at who's driving. Because we're driving right past each other in the parking garage. I look. Guess who it was? Okay, so I see her. I don't say anything because, again, I'm with the subscriber and his sister. They're in the car with me. So I don't say anything, but internally, I'm kind of just speechless. And I just played it off, but internally, I was speechless. I didn't know what to say. She didn't see me in the car, though, because I had tinted windows. And she didn't look at me, but I looked at her. We drove right past each other. Mind you, I hadn't seen this girl since 2020. So, and I mean, it wasn't necessarily something that I never would have expected to happen because, again, we did hang out at this place and I frequented this place quite a bit. Anyways, I see her this time and I drop them off at their car. I leave. Okay, now I go home and I'm just sitting there thinking, what the hell just happened? There's no way that I just actually saw her. Because at this point, I didn't know what was going on in her life right now. For all I knew, she could have been dead. She could have moved to another country. I didn't know. I didn't know what was happening in her life. And I'm assuming she didn't know what was happening in my life either. But again, I wanted her to know because that was the vision that I had. Again, very, very cringe and just, yeah, okay, moving on. So I go home, I'm thinking about this, and this is about a week before my birthday. This is actually one of the reasons why I agreed to meet up with that subscriber and his sister. Me and him had the same birthday, March 14th. So March 14th, well, a few days prior to March 14th, I decided to go ahead and book myself a reservation at this particular restaurant that I liked to go to. Now, I liked going to this restaurant because it was pretty much the most upscale restaurant that I personally went to on a regular basis. This was more of my celebration restaurant. Food is pretty expensive, $45 for a meal, give or take. That's expensive for me. I don't know what type of money you're making if you're spending $100 on a meal or whatever, but 45 is enough for me. So I would just go there whenever I hit certain milestones. So when I hit 100K subscribers, when I moved out into my new apartment, etc. Right? This was my celebration restaurant. So I booked my reservation, and for whatever reason, something told me I was going to see her at that restaurant on that day. Now, you could put two and two together and say, well, maybe subconsciously I just assumed that she would be at that restaurant and that she particularly worked at that restaurant because she had been there with me. Okay, me and her had went to that restaurant. That's the last place that we ate out at. But you can't account for me knowing that she would be there on that day at that time. Something told me she would be there March 14th at, I believe it was 6 or 7 p.m. Something just told me that she would be there, that she works there now, so on and so forth. Now, I initially followed my gut feeling and I canceled the reservation. But then a couple days later, I realized, wait, I liked this restaurant before I ever took her there. So I should be able to go there when I want to, right? It shouldn't necessarily affect my willingness to go to one of my favorite restaurants. So I rebooked my reservation. March 14th, I pull up to this restaurant. Now, I'm driving my Beamer, okay? I'm feeling myself. I had on a black turtleneck. I had on my jewelry. I had on a tan overcoat, maybe some Forces, my Gucci belt. The turtleneck was tucked in so you could see the Gucci belt. Yeah, I was out here. Okay, I was out here feeling myself. Fresh fade, all of that. So I walk in the restaurant and the hostess, she greets me, takes me to the table. I'm eating there by myself, by the way. So it's one of those little singles tables where it has a chair on one side and the booth or the bench on the other side up against the wall. So initially I sat facing the wall, but I don't like to sit with a bunch of people behind me. I don't know if that's just a personal thing or if other people are like that. I like to sit where I can see everything. So I sat initially facing the wall, but then I got up and moved to the other side of the table so that I could see what was going on. And as soon as I sat down and looked up, guess who I saw? Hence the poem. So the poem pretty much fills in the gaps of what happened after that. Basically, I had this moment where I realized, well, I guess I didn't realize this at the time, but I had this moment of actualization. That vision that I had in my head where I would have accomplished all of these things and then essentially flexed on her, not even by trying to flex on her, but just by existing in the state that I was in terms of my financial state and my overall level of success. That was actualized in that moment. Initially, she didn't see me, but I got up to go use the bathroom and I walked right by her. I tried to sneak behind her actually, but then she turned around and she did one of those double take type deal. I didn't even look at her. I just kept walking. So in that moment, I accomplished everything that I'd wanted to accomplish. That was what I wanted. I wanted to flex on this girl, to get back at this girl for ghosting me, for going broke. Allegedly, this is just what my mind told me. Again, I had no proof of this, but this is just what my mind told me. So I accomplished what I wanted, but it didn't bring any gratification. And you want to know why it didn't bring any gratification? Because I realized that one of two scenarios was true. Either scenario one, she didn't care how successful I was, so it didn't really matter how much money I had or what type of car I was driving or anything like that, because ultimately she's moved on. She's moved on with her life, and she's not checking in on what I'm doing on YouTube or anything like that. She's not checking in on my life, just like I'm not checking in on hers. Or scenario two, she is checking in on my life. She already knows what I have going on in my life. She knows about the new car. She knows about the elevated lifestyle. In which case, I never had to get any of that to begin with, because ultimately, she already cared. The mission was already accomplished. I already had rent-free real estate in her subconscious mind. The point that I'm making is that I did all of that. I worked my ass off for 2 years. 2 whole years. I don't regret it, by the way, but I worked my ass off for 2 years to get back at this girl, just to realize that I pretty much wasted that time. I didn't waste it in the sense that the work that I did was not meaningful. I think that was the only redeeming aspect of that journey. But just going out and trying to flex and flaunt and all of that, working so hard, sleepless nights, 3 hours of sleep, skipping meals, all of that, just to get enough money to acquire material items to flex on somebody who is not even in my life. I suspect a lot of young men are doing the same thing. And I'm not here to tell you how to live your life. I'm just here to tell you how I've chosen to live mine and the adjustments that I've made. Because I've done something that a lot of men cannot say that they've done, which is I've been able to actually accomplish the dream that I had in my mind. And I realized that it wasn't worth it. What I've learned is that love is always a better source of fuel than resentment. It always is. And even though you may not necessarily accomplish as much on the surface, especially in the short term, you'll enjoy the journey that much more, and you'll actually feel better. You'll feel a sense of gratification when you accomplish things, because you're doing it from a place of love and abundance, not a place of lack. If you're walking around life trying to do things just to fill a void that you have because somebody left you, you'll never find any sense of gratification or happiness or fulfillment in your life. And I'm speaking from experience with that. I had to essentially undo all of that stuff. I had to dismantle the life that I had built and pretty much start from ground zero, because I realized that the life that I had built was set upon a foundation of foolishness, a foundation of insecurity, a foundation of living my life for somebody who was no longer in it. Now I'm in a position where I have an amazing girlfriend with whom I actually want to build a life together. Not out of spite, but because I love her and she loves me, and we want to use our love to create something together. Something that will withstand the test of time, and something that we can truly enjoy the process of building just as much as we enjoy the view once it's finished.